Before this story begins, in many old villages, there are abandoned wells that no one dares to use anymore. Most people say the water simply went bad, but the oldest villagers tell a very different story. They believe some wells hold more than just water. They hold something that should never be disturbed. The story you're about to hear was told to me by an elderly school teacher. Before he began, he looked at me and quietly said, "If an abandoned well ever calls your name after midnight, never answer it." This happened in 2016. The village was called Batoli. It was a small, peaceful place surrounded by endless rice fields, dense bamboo groves, and ancient mango trees. On the western edge of the village stood the crumbling ruins of an old landlord's mansion. Hidden inside its overgrown courtyard was an ancient well covered in moss. No one knew when it had been built. The villagers simply called it the Black Well. Even during the daytime, very few people went anywhere near it. For years, strange stories had surrounded the well. Some claimed they could hear someone crying from deep inside it after midnight. Others insisted that the air around the well sometimes carried the scent of burning incense. And a few even swore that if you looked into the well late at night, you wouldn't see your own reflection. You would see someone else's face. I never believed any of those stories. My name is Rakib. At the time, I was 24 years old. I had recently finished college and returned to my village while preparing for job exams. One evening, a few of us were sitting at the local tea stall. An elderly man suddenly said, "Tonight is a full moon. No one should go near the Black Well." I laughed. How can an old well possibly hurt anyone? The old man looked straight into my eyes and quietly replied, "Not every answer can be seen with your eyes, son." I ignored his warning. In fact, I decided that I would visit the well that very night. A little after midnight, I grabbed a flashlight and walked alone toward the abandoned mansion. The moment I stepped through the broken entrance, I felt the air around me grow strangely cold. The beam of my flashlight revealed cracked walls, collapsed pillars, and shadows that seemed to move with every step. After walking a little farther, I finally saw it. The old well. Its stone walls were completely covered in moss. Wild grass surrounded it. Above the well, a massive banyan tree stretched its roots over the crumbling stones, as if it had been holding the well captive for decades. I slowly walked closer. Then, I pointed my flashlight into the darkness below. I couldn't see the bottom, only endless blackness. Just then, a single drop echoed from deep inside. Drip. A few seconds later, another one. Drip, drip. I assumed water was simply falling from somewhere above. Then, I heard something else. A slow, scraping sound, as if someone was dragging long fingernails across the stone walls inside the well. Skr, skr. The sound grew louder, little by little. My heartbeat became heavier. I took one slow step backward. Then, from the darkness deep below, a voice quietly called my name. Rakib. I froze. I looked around. There was no one. Then the voice came again. Rakib, "Come a little closer." The voice was exactly like my father's, but that was impossible. My father was asleep at home. I stood there, unable to move. The flashlight trembled in my hand, and from the darkness below, that familiar voice began drawing closer. I stood there, completely frozen. My father's voice echoed from the darkness once again. "Rakib, come a little closer." I knew it couldn't possibly be my father, and yet it felt as though an invisible force was pulling me toward the well. Without realizing it, my feet slowly moved forward. I stopped at the very edge of the well. Once again, I aimed my flashlight into the darkness. Still, I couldn't see the bottom, only endless blackness. Then, deep within that darkness, two glowing eyes slowly appeared. They weren't human. They were far too large, pale white, and staring directly at me without blinking. I tried to step back, but I couldn't. It felt as though my feet had become part of the ground. Then, a hand slowly began rising from inside the well. It looked almost human, but its arm was unnaturally long. Its skin was dark, wrinkled, and looked as though it had been submerged in water for decades. Its fingers were impossibly long, long enough to reach the edge of the well. At that exact moment, my flashlight went out. Complete darkness surrounded me. The only thing I could hear was something slowly climbing up the stone wall inside the well. Skr, skr, skr. The sound grew closer with every passing second. My breathing became heavier. Then, I felt something on my right shoulder. A touch, so cold, it felt like solid ice. But the well was in front of me. So, who was standing behind me? Summoning every bit of courage I had, I slowly turned around. The moment I looked, every ounce of strength left my body. A tall figure was standing only a few feet away. Its entire body was soaking wet. Long, tangled hair covered most of its face. Its eyes were unnaturally white, and across its face stretched an impossibly wide smile. It didn't say a single word. It simply raised one hand and slowly pointed back toward the well. Then, voices began rising from inside the darkness. Not one, but dozens. "Come down. We've been waiting for you. Just one more step." Every voice belonged to someone I knew. My father, my mother, my younger sister, even my own voice. I covered both of my ears, but the voices didn't stop. It sounded as though countless people were trapped beneath the well, calling my name together. Then, the first call to prayer echoed from the distant village mosque. Allahu Akbar. The instant the adhan filled the air, every voice vanished. The freezing cold disappeared. The night became still once again. I gathered the courage to look around. The figure behind me was gone. The hand was gone. The well stood silent, as if nothing had ever happened. I didn't wait another second. I ran all the way home without looking back. The following morning, I told the oldest man in the village everything. He listened quietly. After a long silence, he looked at me and said, "You were lucky. Not everyone comes back." I asked him, "What was that?" The old man stared toward the abandoned well before answering softly. Many years ago, during a terrible drought, several villagers fell into that well while trying to collect water. None of them survived. Since that day, anyone who goes near the well after midnight hears the voices of the people they love the most. Because whatever lives inside that well never calls you with its own voice. Since that night, no one in the village has dared to visit the well after dark. Years have passed. The well has fallen into even greater ruin. The roots of the ancient banyan tree now cover almost all of it. Yet even today, on nights of the full moon, some villagers claim they can still hear someone calling their name from deep inside the darkness. And those who answer are never quite the same again. So, if you ever find yourself walking past an abandoned village well, and you hear the voice of someone you love calling your name, don't answer. Don't look down. Because sometimes, the most familiar voice is the most dangerous trap of all.